And if Mondragon is, as Ben Burgis, he's one of my guys I debated, likes to say, is if it's been such a fantastic success, then should it be that difficult to sell it to unions and to the working classes in this country to start Mondragons? Well, most people are simply not interested in running their own firm. Most people prefer to be wage and salary earners. But again, they don't have to bring about, they don't, let me start that sentence again. They can only.
I don't know. It just real quick, because I don't want, but like with all of this, like with what most right wingers would probably espouse of like hustle culture of like own your own business and like it's just such a weird to be like, oh no, like all of you guys want to. Oh, you guys don't want to be independently wealthy. You just want to earn.
Yeah, I mean, how many people actually own their own businesses versus have a book lying somewhere around somewhere in their house called "How to Start Your Own Business"?
Yeah,
like, or
I mean,
watch one of these insanely successful YouTube videos about like, how to be your own boss. Like, this is a very widespread fantasy. By the way, this goes to the point about collective action problems, because one of the things that the ground rules of the market says is, well, you know, you can like. You don't have to, like, if you're going to go through the considerable effort and considerable risk of starting your own business, knowing that most businesses fail, right? That's just the deal, right? Most of them aren't going to get off the ground, or certainly last more than whatever it is, 2 years or whatever, and then like, if you put all of your, if you put your life savings into a business and like it goes bust within the first year, then like you're in a really bad position. And most people understand that that's like a big risk to take. And if you are willing to take that risk, and you are willing to, like we were saying, you have values and, preferences, but you also have all kinds of other incentives operating on you. If you are willing to just drop everything else in your life and spend like the next several years constantly hustling and sweating to like try to get this business off the ground that all of your money is invested in, that's like, yeah, why not go for broke and like why settle for being like a co-owner of a workplace republic when you can shoot the moon and like try to be the king of a workplace kingdom, right? Try to be the boss. And so it's like, yeah, I think this is a game where it's like, look, you're probably going to fail either way. You might as well go for broke, so again, it goes to the collective action problem, but like, it's not that like, I don't know who he's arguing with here, because it's not like socialists are sitting around saying, like, yeah, everybody should have to like risk their life savings and spend, and spend all of their time doing nothing but constantly hustling, get a business off the ground in order to have democratic rights in the workplace. What socialists are saying is, we believe that people actually have a right to material security and comfort, and like have, and that people shouldn't have to make that choice. Right. That, like what we object to about capitalism is precisely that having the system structured this way gives people bad choices. We think that there should be a door number 3, right? It's not that like you should have to either submit to workplace authoritarianism or risk losing everything. And like, also, by the way, lose all your free time in the process to try to gain some kind of autonomy. That, we think there can be a system whereby you have both. Now, Gene could disagree, fair enough, right? Like, but it just seems to me to be a much more honest disagreement if you're engaged with what people are actually saying. That it's like, yeah, we think, I mean, this is why we, like, anytime anybody envisions how socialism could work, it's like, there's always a big role for the state, because like, we don't think that the market can do this, that like, we think that you need, even the sorts of things that would be thought of as like market socialism, like in the sense that there's still some market mechanisms that exist in this vision of like how a short-term realistic socialist society would work, like David Schweikart's After Capitalism, or like John Romer's A Future for Socialism and stuff. There's always a big role for like nationalized banks as kind of the backbone of the whole thing, precisely because we think that there should be a way for people to be able to achieve these things that doesn't, we think that people should be able to have this autonomy in this part of their lives that they spend at work without having to make those sacrifices. Again, Gene could disagree with that, but like, we're not even entering into the real argument until he acknowledges that that's what we think.
Yeah, for sure. I guess we should get back to Gene talking to his grandson.
Only resort and propose the iron fist of government to bring about their dream.
There we go.
Because once again, you have to call their bluff and bear in mind that workers don't really want what they're selling. And if workers don't want what they're selling, their only recourse is to try to get control of the government via the ballot box through an election. But if they get 51% of the vote, then they will use government to seize and impose worker ownership through the iron fist on.
If you get 51% of the vote, it sounds like 51% of the workers actually do want that, no?
Yeah.
That's true.
Like, I mean, my understanding of how arithmetic works, right? I mean, like, if you get a majority of the vote, that means that more voters actually do want it than don't want it.
But what about the 49%?
Yeah, well, sure. Also, by the way, you can't even, the idea that you could accomplish even a super minimal social democratic program with 51% of the vote, never mind workers' control of the fucking means of production, is bizarre, right? I mean, it's like, you obviously need a much bigger majority than that to have any hope of overcoming the resistance of capital. But put that aside, okay, I mean, I know you're, fucking around, but it's like what you just said, Jake, is the real issue, right? That's the real question, right? It's not this actually workers don't really want it, it's because look, if his consumer boycott, fantasy scenario works, okay, well, they would probably work despite some people not wanting it to work. The difference is that he thinks that's okay. Because if it's just that enough people buy a product or don't buy a product that the right company goes out of business or stays in business that you don't like, then those are just the breaks. But he thinks that it's not okay for the minority to lose when the way that they're losing is through state action. That his real issue is this thing about the iron fist of the government, which makes it really frustrating to me as somebody who's debated Gene Epstein twice, that he won't just put aside all the rest of this fluff and nonsense and distraction about oh, what about this theoretical consumer boycott scenario? That has nothing to do with your real objection. The real thing is, would it be morally wrong to use the iron fist of the government to redistribute property and to expropriate the means of production, bring about workers' control? He thinks that would be wrong and authoritarian. I disagree. That's a debate that's actually worth having.
On all of enterprise. Now that will be a gross injustice, a grotesque seizure of property by the government. That's what they propose because the workers are simply not accepting what they want. And then I make the point that if they are true Marxists, if they truly care about the left-wing tradition of a revolution from below, if they truly are people, are intellectuals of the people, then of course worker ownership should come about in the way that I propose, through bottom up rather than top down. And yet top down solutions are their only solution. So I guess I'm speaking rather heatedly because of course these people do get me a bit impatient. They can't let go of their crazy ideas because secretly, I guess they know that workers are not going for it, are not buying it, are not really supporting what they want. Now, the other part of it, ironically, I think it's a bit ironically, is that I would personally like to see more worker ownership. I think that the more people become interested in running enterprise and in understanding the headaches and problems of running enterprise, I think the healthier our society would become. And so I tell them, look, I kept telling Richard Wolff in our debate, I welcome what you propose. Just do it the right way. Don't resort to the iron fist of government the way so many socialists have in the past. And I think that part of the problem with somebody like Richard Wolff in particular is that he does have an authoritarian streak, and that it doesn't really appeal to him to talk to workers. I think that's part of it. But I'm just grateful for the fact that I wasn't really interested in convincing them, my socialist debaters, about that point of view. I was just interested in parading their ideas before the public, with 5.2 million YouTube views of my debate with Richard Wolff, and the other two I got over 100,000, which is still pretty significant. So a lot of people have heard these ideas and seen them aired and seen them exposed for the fraudulence that they are. So to answer your question again, I've been there, done that, and there's very little that the socialists can tell me. Practically nothing the socialists can tell me that's worth listening.
I just realized this was all
it seems
one
like
answer.
the core of the argument is really just separating voluntary socialism from political socialism or forceful socialism. And what you're suggesting is that maybe we can have socialist values just peacefully.
Yeah, right. No, exactly. Voluntary socialism is synonymous with free market capitalism. It's synonymous in the sense voluntary socialism is perfectly achievable within free market capitalism. There are some worker-owned firms. There are a lot of people who like to run their own firms. And so that's all perfectly possible. So long live voluntary socialism, and that, of course, is the whole point. And indeed, you summarized it pretty well. And again, as I say, it's a matter of inclination. But I would prefer to see more worker ownership. Some might not. Although I will say that that I worked for News Corp, Dow Jones, and I probably would not want to be a part of a worker-owned firm any more than I like to be a part of a residential co-op. I think it's better run by landlords and by responsible people. So I probably wouldn't want that. In the case of the other guy, Ben Burgis, who actually probably put up the best argument, more than Richard Wolff did. Ben Burgis is in a way the worst, only because he actually has explicitly said, as I pointed out when I debated him, that he, in his social society, would make it unlawful to work for a firm that was conventionally run. You would be legally obligated to work for a worker-owned firm. You would have no choice. And I regret a little bit that I wasn't a little harder on him when he was asked from the floor, well, would you put these people in prison? Because who insist on working for conventionally run firms, because he hemmed and he hawed, and he was able to say, oh, well, he'd be reluctant to put such people in prison. But of course, he made it fairly clear that he would be prepared to punish you if you tried something so dastardly as to work for a conventionally run firm. And that's, again, my problem with Ben Burgis, who's a nice guy personally, but he too clearly has an authoritarian streak. There are socialists who, when given that dilemma, that problem, well, let's say people prefer to work for a firm that's managed by others and that's owned by others. What then? If you respect, human choice, and some number of socialists say, well, I guess we'd have to put up with that. But Ben Burgis is, I asked Ben, I guess somewhat provocatively, well, at the debate, why would you make it unlawful? What are you afraid of? What are you afraid of? And because, well, I mean, he must be afraid of the fact that a lot of people, even once he creates a social society, are going to drift away from what he thinks is such a good idea for them. But he wasn't able to back down from that. And again, it unfortunately does reveal in him a strong authoritarian streak that I find rather dismaying. Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the most pernicious kind of ideas that comes out of leftism that
Andy, do you know how long ago this was?
About 8 months ago. It was earlier this year.
Okay, so I do want to be fair here to a point, because more recently Wolff has made some of the same claims on Twitter. This is actually, he made them the last time we talked about him on the show was when he was making some of these same claims on Twitter, and it took like 20 rounds, and he did it in a way that I have to say lacked grace. But he did eventually admit that I did not actually say that, and that he's conflated some very different things there, right? So because the point that I like the point that I made over and over again at the debate, what he's calling hem and Hein, is that this is structurally indistinguishable from the objection you could make to minimum wage laws or any labor laws in general, right? Well, what about somebody who wanted to work for less than minimum wage, whatever, like that, that like that's the law doesn't allow for that, or like 8-hour laws, or if you go back to 19th century Britain, 10-hour laws, right? That's like, well, what about the person who's willing to work for 11, right? And so what I was trying to get out of him, and what I would say he was hemming and hawing, is on the question of, if all of this is authoritarian, if you're going to describe not allowing certain labor practices as using the iron fist of the state, then, and that's the objection. It's not just that we're disagreeing about whether particular labor practices are okay, but you're describing outlawing certain labor practices as bad in itself, as authoritarian in itself, as using the iron fist of the state. Then why doesn't that critique go for 8-hour laws? Why doesn't it go for minimum wage laws? Like, what's the difference? And he never really spelled out the difference. I suspect that the reason he didn't spell out the difference is that he's that he has that like really he's against all that stuff too. That he just doesn't want to say it. He knows it's wildly unpopular. So he doesn't want to, he's not going to lie and say he's fine with it. Like he's probably too honest for that, but he's not going to like, he doesn't want to come out and say that he's against it, because like 99% of normal people are in favor of all that stuff and are horrified by being against it. And then the point that came up in the Twitter discussion was that he's pretending, when he's trained this as a question, it's like, oh, what would you do to like workers who, in workplaces that like didn't give them a vote, that he's pretending not to understand how labor laws work, that nothing, right? I mean, it's like minimum wage laws aren't enforced by even fining, never mind putting in jail, workers who are getting paid less than the minimum wage, right? The people who are fined are the employers who pay them less than minimum wage. It's not that like, oh, you agreed to this, therefore you're getting fined. That's not how labor laws are ever enforced. It's that, laws against, minimum wage laws, 8-hour laws against union busting, these are never enforced by legally punishing workers who agree to the illegal conditions. They're always enforced by going after the employers themselves. Not, by the way, as Jake pointed out last time we were talking about this, I mean, imagine how many consecutive life sentences Howard Schultz would be serving right now if like we really enforce labor laws by imprisoning people, that like we're, really we enforce labor, like labor laws in much milder ways than that, but like even those, so you can come up with some scenario whereby, the employer would end up in prison the same way that you could say like, Social Security is using the iron fist of the state, because if somebody didn't deduct the Social Security taxes or paycheck, and then they got fined and they refused to pay the fine, and your, noise violations are, like you wanted to say that like laws against like noise on residential streets were, were like the iron fist of the state. It's like, yeah, there's a scenario whereby like, okay, you're fine, you don't pay your fine, you're given a bunch of chances, 20 steps down the line, you can concoct a scenario where you end up seeing the inside of jail over that, right? But like, realistically, that's not really how any of this works. And then like the last point I would make about it is just like, and this is why it's so frustrating to me that he hides the ball in the normative question, that what he presents himself as wanting to argue about is this scenario about like, what about the like, oh, why not just use consumer boycotts that don't really work? But it's like his whole reason for saying that the only legitimate way to do it would be consumer boycotts or whatever, these other free market amenable ways. His whole reason for that is that he thinks it would be like morally wrong to use the state. And it's like, so it's like, okay, so forget the rest of that. So those are all just red herrings. Let's argue about whether it'd be morally wrong to use the state, because that's the thing that we actually disagree about. And then once we did argue about that, my point would be that one, I'm not going to spend too much time on here because people have heard me say it a million times, but that say like, oh, I'm fine with voluntary socialism, not involuntary socialism. It's like, look, all property rights are enforced by the iron fist of the state. That's not, it doesn't matter whether you're enforcing the existing distribution or you're forcing a redistribution. The two are exactly equally coercive. If you like, yeah, I mean, the line I always use, like, yeah, a letter from the IRS, it does involve an implicit threat of coercive power, but so does a no trespassing sign. Like see what see what happens if you're a cashier and you try to keep keep more of the money for yourself at the end of the day, right? Like, that's all property rights are enforced by the state. That's like, anytime you're saying here's some scarce resources and some people have access to them and some people don't, and ultimately that system only works if somebody's enforcing it, like, otherwise it's just a suggestion, like, that it's like, yeah, the iron fist of the state is equally present whether you're enforcing existing capitalist property rights or you're redistributed to try to do something more equal and democratic. And so I think ultimately, that's a red herring too. And like, this is just like, and that's the argument that I wish I could have had with Gene. And I tried to have it a little bit, both of the times that I debated with him, but he just kind of insists on going off on all these irrelevancies on consumer boycotts and all of that.
Yeah, he earlier he brought up Richard Wolff saying saying what happened during the debate, and he's just like chastising Richard Wolff about not remembering what happened in the debate, and then he goes on and like completely misremembers your debate with him. Now, I've not seen his debate with Richard Wolff, so and I don't even know what Richard Wolff was saying because he never actually said what Richard Wolff was saying. So.
Yeah, I think some of the stuff he said Richard Wolff was misremembering. I'm actually not even sure Wolff was misremembering, because he has because like some of the stuff that I've seen Wolff say does actually sound like Gene to me, but whatever. We'd have to go back, and we're not gonna. We're about to wrap up tonight's post game, and I don't know that we're gonna devote enough time on any future one to do the Zapruder film, frame by frame analysis of his debate with Richard Wolff, but I'm just going to express some mild, polite skepticism about this. Also, by the way, this is funny timing because Andy, as we've mentioned, is the one who brought this clip to our attention tonight. So I didn't suggest at all that we talk about Jane Epstein tonight. It's just weird timing. But the reason it's weird timing is that day before yesterday, on Saturday, I got a text from an organizer of a festival that I'm going to be at in New Jersey in June. That's like, it's the kind of thing I go to, right? It's like, I think there are also maybe some stand-up comedy or films or something, but it's like the part that's of interest to me is like panels of people arguing about politics. And it's like a mixture of people with different ideologies. It's the Icarus Festival in Rutherford, New Jersey in June. Okay, so the I just found out on Saturday that Gene Epstein, who'd previously agreed, withdrew from that a couple days ago, citing the presence of well, he said, he said something about authoritarians and like stuff like that, but the only one he named that he specifically name checked was me, which cited the presence of me, basically, which is like, I'm sure he could have just requested not to be on a panel with me without withdrawing from the entire festival. It's like, it's the concern that we're gonna like bump into each other at the hall and like I'll say something, and I'll say something authoritarian about labor laws. You have been watching free public content from Give Them an Argument. To access every single episode of the show, the main show on Monday nights, all of the streams, all of the debate breakdowns, all of the patron exclusive post games on Monday nights, all of the patron exclusive bonus episodes every week, and much, much more, go to patreon.com/Ben Burgis. I cannot resist ending this with, don't be foolish.